Sorry, you caught me in the middle of something. I was trying to figure out how to send the fire emoji to Rachel Ziegler with this thing. Let's be honest. The ability to slide into the DMs was the death of romance. Granted that there's open messaging and you don't have to get a follow request approval, there's no barrier to entry to shoot your shot and try to win over a stranger who you think you know through their online posts. There isn't much convincing required for us to believe that we can get all the necessary social connection through a screen. Not to be a Luddite, but this is pretty bleak. Though this might be the reality that many of us have accepted as the status quo, that doesn't mean that we don't dream of a bygone era where real yearners could thrive. Most people would point to the birth of social media as the end of true romance, but I believe we lost our way back in the year 1996 when the internet became a meeting place for digital souls. The first electronic message was technically sent in the early 60s as a part of a program at MIT, but the first message sent between two computers happened in the 1970s through ARPANET by Ray Tomlinson, who invented the @ symbol. Over the next 2 decades, this technology was developed through the research division of the US Department of Defense and was later refined by tech giants like Microsoft and Google. Businesses, the government, and academics were sending the majority of these emails. Among the general public, it would take until the mid-90s for this practice to become mainstream. This is where our first story begins. Over in Silicon Valley, Ellen Ullman was working on the development of personal computers and program interface libraries back when the coding language was C without the pluses. And she collected many of her reflections of this programming space in a wonderful book called Life in Code. Though all of these essays provide great insight into the crushing reality of making technology the main focus of your life, the second essay, Come in CQ, showcases some serious computer-induced limerence. While working as a contractor on an unnamed project, Ullman started a conversation with a team member named Carl late at night. Though they do see each other in team meetings on occasion, their conversations mostly stay online and remain job-related. This might seem innocuous, but due to the importance of the work, this becomes a very personal connection.
Cut off from real working things, we construct a substitute object, the program. We treat it as if it could be specified like machinery and assembled out of standard parts. We say we engineered it. And cut off from the real body, we construct a substitute body, ourselves online. We treat it as if it were our actual self, our real life. Over time, it does indeed become our life.
By being so invested in developing a new world built by technology, it becomes easy to relate more to the digital personas and roles programming gives them, rather than tangible ones. Despite having immense knowledge of exciting new worlds, their inner lives are not much more than the work that they do. However, there's something special about Carl that leads to more and more late-night conversations as they slowly grow more curious about each other's lives. Unlike most of the programmers who are hostile towards Ullman, partially because she's a woman, mainly because she's a woman, Carl respects her beyond her ability to be a perfect programmer. This kinship continues to build, but Ullman senses something that's missing in this digital bond.
It's tempting to think of these email exchanges as just another epistolary romance. The sorrows of young Werther with phone lines. But the mail in electronic mail is just a linguistic artifact. Lasers can be described in terms of candle power, but there's no flicker, no slow, hot drip of wax and laser light. And there's not much mail left in email. I had in my desk drawer a piece of paper on which Carl had written the title and author of a book he had recommended. There was his writing, precise and print-like, standing straight upward, as lean and spare as his body. Having this piece of paper, I knew what the email lacked, the evidence of his flesh, the work of his hand.
The connection that's made between two people from one processing system to another is a wonder. But the mystery of the default font does not make up for the intimacy that is created by possessing the handwriting of the person who you long to be understood by. It's easy to be satisfied with having direct contact with someone who you're longing for, but there's new rules and boundaries created by the constraints of technology. Although this era of online messaging was imitating the letter correspondence of the bygone era, the artifice of technology creates a bigger gap between reality and simulated connection. When Ellen and Carl finally go on a date, the rigid back and forth created by the emails does not fall away. The persona that was imagined through the computer screen remains two-dimensional.
Yet he talked. My turn, over. Your turn. He walked briskly, never adjusting his pace to mine. Finally, I couldn't stand it. I stood still. I put my hands in my pockets, faced the ocean, and watched the waves setting up in the dark. I felt my whole body saying, touch me, put your arm around me, only brush my shoulder, even just stand next to me, your hands in your pockets, but let our jacket sleeves graze each other.
This visceral reaction to the gap between the two of them remaining the same, even face to face, illustrates the fundamental issue of email, the lack of catharsis. Besides the fact that Ellen is hungry for human connection, she's looking forward to the reality of finally having their bodies connecting in a similar manner that their minds did through the computer. By removing the constrictions of technology, it would seem that the logical next step is to have some sort of embodied experience that involves not only the literal voices of each party, but the warmth of each other's skin. But Carl seemingly only wants to meet in person to continue the ping-ponging of ideas, unbothered and untethered by the hunger for physical connection. Ullman is let down by this. Any normal person would be. The nail in the coffin comes from the email after the date, something that's universal even in today's age. Carl says that he had a lovely time, which goes completely against what Ullman was feeling. The lack of explosive passion that she was hoping for was not recognized at all. The fantasy that Carl had was simpler. It lacked any yearning that Ullman felt through their late-night correspondence. The playfulness of the internet strips back the vulnerability that would emerge from focusing on each brushstroke as you craft each word. While Ullman hopes for courtship, Carl seems not to be aware of the power he holds through building up digital intimacy.
Carl was who he was, a man who came alive through words on a screen. There was no use expecting more of him. The facts of our real lives, all the years before we met in the group Alias, meant we could never touch on deserted shorelines or across dinner tables. Our public selves would have to go on talking about programs and users and file permissions, so we were lucky for the email.
The final truth that Ullman comes to terms with is the fact that some people are not prepared for yearning. Some people are satisfied with being immersed in the alien world of the future, unbothered by the primordial urge to feel the embrace of another. Even Ullman concedes to the idea that she would not be capable to spark an intimate connection in real life, so she also is using the emails as a substitution for genuine intimacy. Nowhere in the reflection does Ullman claim any erotic desire for Carl. Instead, it's focused on a hypothetical courtship between two computer geeks, as awkward as can be. So in the end, perhaps it is better to be content to use email as an emotional crutch that allows for some brief glimpses of embodied love. Happening parallel to Ellen's failed love life on the other side of the country are the events of Elif Batuman's The Idiot. The semi-autobiographical novel follows Celine, a Harvard undergraduate pursuing an education in linguistics, who gets enraptured by the online flirtations of an older classmate named Yvonne. The emails exchanged by Yvonne and Celine start off as a playful game, going from references to the book that they're reading to learn Russian, to talking poetically about the beauty of the world that they seem to only understand. There's an unspoken agreement that these emails aren't supposed to outright say what each person is feeling, always diverting to abstract concepts that point towards the kinship that they find in each other's email personas. However, when they cross paths on campus, Yvonne acts like Celine is invisible. When confronted, Yvonne claims that small talk ruins the allure of their emails. Celine tries to drop the conversation, but she only can take so much before she breaks character to confess her real feelings of the game.
I don't understand why it will trivialize these letters to say hi, or actually talk to each other. You say you're not in the mood for insignificant subtleties, but insignificant subtleties are the only difference between something special and a huge pile of garbage floating through space. I think I'm falling in love with you. Every day it's harder for me to see the common denominator, to understand what counts as a thing. All the categories that make up a dog, they go blurry and dissolve. I can't tell what anything is anymore.
This confession hinges on the reality that these simulated letters are intangible, both in the physical sense and the linguistic sense. Though Celine knows that Yvonne is the writer of the letters, it doesn't match up with the physical version of him that she sees daily, who seems to be a husk that is indifferent to her existence. This dual reality eats away at Celine, as it would to anybody getting mixed signals from someone who has become their primary fantasy. After receiving this email, Yvonne turns the tables and confesses something that makes things even more unclear.
When I write to you, I feel something similar, as if my thoughts and moods are directly in the keystrokes. I don't know why I want this, because clearly it's really hard to understand. I understand maybe 1/3 of what you write, and probably vice versa. On the other hand, from the third I do understand, I get more of you than I could ever get from anything down to earth and crystal clear, like an explanation or an essay. Whatever you write with so much care and intensity has an image of you in it, That's why I fear the triviality of conversations. What if I want to get to you to the same degree as through these letters, and I find out I can't? I've been through a lot of things in the past 2 years, and my thoughts about love have changed. I have a girlfriend whom I only love sometimes. I do think of you a lot. My love for you is for the person writing the letters.
The you that Yvonne is referring to is less of who he thinks Celine is, but what he hopes she really is like. The abstraction of Celine through the computer screen gives a more scandalous image than what would originally be obtained by really knowing her in person, which Yvonne alludes to but doesn't outright say. As opposed to viewing Celine as someone who has complexity in her physical existence, he yearns to allow for her to be a never-ending poem to ponder through the internet. The act of mining for meaning in another person's existence would be seen as terrible in real life, but the world of email allows for the ethics of connection to fall away a little. If he never has a fully realized image of Celine, then he can continue this excavation until he gets bored. When they finally do have a full conversation in the flesh, Yvonne, like most men who talk a big game over text, refuses to acknowledge the bond that they're building when confronted face to face. For him, actually confronting the effects of bearing his soul to Celine is too much to handle. To paraphrase a certain sniffling Eastern European philosopher, a nightmare is having a fantasy realize in the space of flesh and blood. Yvonne is able to suppress this fact, partially because he's already in a relationship, a loveless one, but also because he's nonchalant to a gross degree. In one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the novel, Yvonne and Celine go swimming at a nearby pond. Because of the impromptu nature of this trip, Celine forgets a towel, which leads to a seemingly minor disagreement.
I told him that I was just going to put my clothes on over my bathing suit. I don't think you should do that, he said in such definitive tone that I felt shocked. Excuse me? It's wet, it's windy, you'll be cold. I wondered why I felt so much resistance to letting him hold a towel in front of me while I took off my clothes. After all, I was the one with the crush. Later, when he was gone, wouldn't I wish to be back here again, just as we were now? Just think, he said. What would your mother say? Tears welled to my eyes. My mother would be sorry for me.
For Celine, this moment of exposure is something that can and should be avoided due to the strange intimacy that it creates. This is not recognized at all by Yvonne, which is humiliating given the limbo that their relationship seems to be in. Yvonne is unable to see how awkward and demanding he is being, which causes him to belittle Celine by treating her like a child. If he truly understood the you found in the emails, he would understand that Celine cares a great deal about making him like her. When the two would-be lovers finally go their separate ways at the end of the summer, they play a question game to share their true feelings. Yvonne elects to drink while Celine soberly processes his explanation for his behavior. They both admit to their habits of trying to hurt each other emotionally, which seems to be the most intimate confession that either of them have ever made.
He was happy that I hurt like that, and I knew I had felt the same happiness anytime he mentioned feeling hurt by me. Why was it fun for us to make each other suffer? Did that mean it wasn't love? Surely that wasn't what love was.
Yvonne ends the game by saying that he did not view their emails as actual conversation, but instead something better. In the same way that Ellen Ullman was unable to accept her date with Carl as equivalent to a normal conversation, here we see Yvonne reveal that he doesn't like the format of a traditional conversation. The ability to not be interrupted and have an unlimited amount of time to craft the perfect response is what Yvonne really wants from Celine, as if he has the void of the internet speak back to him. This is the last time we see Yvonne. Celine says her goodbyes, but tries to get over the lack of closure that this conversation has brought her. As the novel closes, we're left wondering with Celine if there really is any way to crack the secret of the English language. Despite how close the emails made her and Yvonne feel, there's a fundamental language barrier between them, not of different dialects, but of effects of words. By figuring out the real form that Yvonne took, Celine had to contend with the nightmare that the fantasy could never be fulfilled. Even if he tried to make it seem like it was an issue on both ends, Celine is still left with the dissatisfaction of not receiving the same care that she was willing to give freely. A final question remains. Is catharsis attainable in the connections that you make with the other roaming souls on this earth? Or is there a fundamental gap in the language that only email can convey? Jumping a few years into the future and a couple states over, we can see the shift from professional and academic use of the internet to general entertainment for those brave enough to surf the web. You've Got Mail follows two New Yorkers who have inherited their respective parents' book businesses. They're connected anonymously through AOL Messenger and build up a romance as they fluctuate between enemies and friends in the real world. The reason these two worlds haven't collided earlier is that they made a promise not to share any actual personal details, mostly because they're both in relationships. Though there's a lot that can be said about the trend of emotional cheating in rom-coms, I think that there's much more to talk about when it comes to the way that online messaging creates a false sense of authenticity. When Kathleen confesses her chat room activities with her coworker, she makes it very clear that there's no actual weight behind the choice to continue the relationship.
We just email. It's really nothing. On top of which, I am definitely thinking about stopping because it's getting
Out of hand.
confusing. But not because it's nothing.
Regardless of what she tries to present about the situation, Kathleen still gets a lot of pleasure out of her AOL messaging with Joe. Whatever intimacy or excitement that she's lacking in her current relationship is instead being fulfilled by the riskiness of her secret online letter writing, and the ability to stop when it gets too deep serves as a justification for indulging more than she expects. This need for risky exposure of the self is laid out wonderfully in the book The Disappearance of Rituals, which examines the effects of neoliberalism on the development of relationships in the modern era, mainly focusing on the illusion of what we are told are healthy connections and the pornification of society.
The compulsion of authenticity leads to a narcissistic introspection, a permanent occupation with one's own psychology. Communication is also organized psychologically. The society of authenticity is a society of intimacy and exposure. The nudism of the soul into which we are encouraged lends society a pornographic character. Social relations are more genuine and authentic the more intimate they are, the more they reveal what was private.
We can see this sentiment in our day-to-day lives, especially with the continued gripe that people have with the idea of small talk. But as Han is pointing out, the need for skipping past the ritual of small talk requires someone to metaphorically strip for us. Though the online conversations between Joe and Kathleen don't seem to be participating in this nudism of the soul, they're using each other as a means to vent their frustrations about each other unknowingly, which seems to be an extremely intimate act with someone you don't even know the basic facts about. As this metaphorically risque connection simmers, Kathleen and Joe in the real world are becoming more and more hostile due to Joe's bookstore slowly running Kathleen out of business.
They have to have discounts and lattes because most of the people who work there have never read a book.
She's not as nice as she seems on television. You met her? Yeah. Boy, she's a pill.
All of the banter and camaraderie developed over AOL does not transfer at all in their everyday personas, with Joe coming across as more heartless than he actually seems to be. Once both sides of the relationship reach maximum capacity, Kathleen decides to try to meet up with her mysterious pen pal. Joe spots her at a cafe before she does, and he decides to see how she would react to running into him organically.
I think you discover a lot of things if you really knew me.
If I really knew you, I know what I would find. Instead of a brain, a cash register. Instead of a heart, a bottom line. You with your theme park, multi-level, homogenize the world, mochaccino land. You've deluded yourself into thinking that you're some sort of benefactor bringing books to the masses. But no one will ever remember you, Joe Fox.
It doesn't end well because of the adversarial dynamic they built up, and Joe realizes that he can't reveal his identity without building a strong connection with Kathleen. This leads him on a journey to go through the motions of gradual emotional intimacy as he patches up a connection not based on their past tension. Now, this is the real embodied yearning that the world of email might give hints to, but cannot serve as an emotional replacement for true connection. Rather than creating a deeper connection online based on previous interactions, Kathleen and Joe can get to know the real versions of each other based on conversations with real, in-time chemistry. Removed from the curated sentences and paragraphs of email, they manage to experience the genuine nature of love through encounters that may seem mundane, but are made special by being with each other. The film ends with Kathleen being overjoyed that NY152 really was the rival that she had started to love. Finally, she was able to choose embodying a reckless love that would bring her a happy ending of her story. Despite losing the bookstore and her job, there is hope for her apart from the internet. This seems to be the best case scenario with these relationships built upon email. If you aren't able to consolidate the performances that you do over the internet in real life, you will be unable to live an embodied life that reveals true authenticity. These two people might not be the blueprint of modern love, but their quirks and desires are strong enough to get over the hurdles of early internet romance. As we move closer to the world of online spaces to meet each other from the world of early email in this last story, we get a glimpse of the future to come. With the boom of social media in the early 2010s, people are satisfied with the imagined worlds that online messaging provides. Instead of imagining the face of the person you're obsessed with, you're granted a curated gallery of pictures and thoughts to satisfy your desire for connection. We meet halfway in the digital realm, with all the desire and eroticism that we want, but little to no obligation to act on said feelings in real life. Though none of these stories explicitly say it, there's a looming sense of dread that we get from imagining the person on the other side of the screen only wanting us to fuel their desire. There isn't much difference between being in love with the technology and being in love with the hypothetical person behind the words littering the text thread. Obviously, this isn't meant to be a bad faith take on romance in the late 20th century and a call to return to tradition. There aren't really any glory days that would bring zero pain when it comes to love. Humanity has been struggling with these feelings since the very beginning of civilization, especially in a time when women definitely didn't have the agency to participate in these written courtships freely. Nostalgia for early forms of communication is not a foolish position to hold, but there's a clear problem that comes from the ease of connection that technology has created. We as humans yearn for flesh and blood, in the small things like handwriting or typos, or even the repeated phrases that we search for in DMs with those whom we don't talk to anymore. There's a clear disconnect that's growing within Western society, especially with the alienation and social awkwardness that young people are experiencing. If these are the things that people are latching onto to find connection, then we have to advocate for an embodied endpoint for this love. The internet is not a place. It's a tool and a stepping stone that connects us in the world of flesh and blood, even if it seems terrifying and impossible. To truly live an embodied life full of love and messiness, you first have to accept the things that are awkward and might seem mundane, because those are the aspects of human connection that remind us that we're human. The flaws that we try to iron out of communication through technology can only go so far. I don't think anybody wants to tell their grandchildren that they met their soulmate because of a risky Instagram reel or AI-assisted flirting. I have hope that we're not doomed to continue down this path of automated love. The human heart is not shaped to be satisfied only by electronic desire. But I'm still going to see if I can shoot my shot to Rachel Ziegler. I think I have a chance.